G'day Burleigh Village Church, lovely to be with you today in your house church. One of those houses I'm actually watching this kind of cringing. But other than that, we are going to jump into things today, and this video can be paused throughout. You can use it to your house church's benefit or whatever works for you. And so now we're going to pause, and your house church facilitator is going to open things up in prayer and ask the question that will appear on the screen now. Today we're looking at adventurous faith in the life of Samson. And this one's really interesting, how it plays out and what it means and what form it takes on. Because before we read Samson's story and explore it, we need to understand a few things. First of all, we need to understand that it was a chauvinistic culture. That it was male-oriented through and through. It was treacherous. Betrayal was everywhere and invaded and affected everyone. It was violent and barbaric, and so no one was safe, and their acts toward each other were often really violent. And it was during this time that the reigning theology of the day was the God who is most violent and most strong is the better God, not the God who is most loving and caring. And so we need to understand these things and keep these things in mind as we read through how they tried to portray God in Samson's story. But that's not exactly where we're headed. That's important information, but it's not the lens that we're going to look through today. We're going to explore Samson's life because he is the most unworthy name to be in the Hebrews 11 Hall of Faith. Out of everyone, he least deserves to be there, and I am easily going to prove that today. And we're going to ask the question, why? What was adventurous about his faith that enabled him to be included amongst the greats when he was clearly not a great? So why is he here? And we're going to start by, I'm going to invite you to pause and read the following verses. Samson was set aside by God before he was born, which meant that God had plans that he was going to fulfill through Samson's life, regardless of what Samson's life looked like or the decisions and actions Samson took. God used Samson's missteps to become God's fruitful steps. It's interesting how that can happen, isn't it? So let me cruise through those missteps, because there are plenty. I'm going to give you an overview of Judges 13 to 16 and all the wonderful things that Samson did that were quite disastrous. So first of all, he chooses a wife from the enemy of the people of Israel. It's the big no-no in the Old Testament, and yet he does it. He asks for a Philistine wife. And then, on the way to a sort of a wedding party, an engagement party for he and his wife, he is attacked by a lion. He rips the lion apart, and then honey grows in the lion, and so he takes some of the honey, and he gets to the party, and they want to make a wager. They challenge him with a wager, and he says, sure. I'm going to tell you a riddle, and if you can get the riddle, I owe you, and if you win, you owe me. Anyway, his new wife, the lady he's engaged to, betrays him and tells the enemy, the Philistines, what the answer to the riddle is, which is the only possible way they could work out what this riddle is. And so he loses, and in dramatic style, he goes and beats up like a battalion of Philistine army soldiers, beats them up, steals the stuff that he owes for the wager, and takes it back. So he pays his debt because he lost this prideful challenge by beating up a bunch of guys and because of his strength and stealing from them. So then his wife is taken from him by his dad. His dad's not impressed at his wife and her betrayal, so takes him from him, and he finds out, and he's not mad about his dad. He's not mad towards his dad. He's not even mad toward his wife. He's mad toward the Philistines, who ultimately had this beef with him in the challenge. And so he catches 300 foxes, which is fascinating, ties them together, sets fire to them, and they run through all of the produce and grain and wine stores of the Philistines, and they burn the lot. They total the lot. They destroy everything. As a response to that, his wife is burned alive with her father, and he loses his mind. And he goes on a rampage and starts destroying and killing people left, right and centre, Philistines. And once he's done and he's tired, he retreats to a cave. And then in the cave, he is actually approached by the Judean army, so the army of Judah, which is part of the Israel people. So the army of Judah come to him after being put under pressure by the Philistines to say, you need to capture this guy, we need to sort this problem out. So they come to Samson. He says, well, tie me up and that will hold my strength and you can deliver me to the Philistines. So they do that, only he's lying. That wasn't going to contain his strength at all. And when he gets to where all the Philistines are, he breaks the straps, he thwarts their trap to arrest him and capture him, and he kills a whole bunch of others. It's hard, thirsty work, and as a result of all that, he then has a whinge to God about not being able to quench his thirst because he's so thirsty. And as he does that, God breaks a rock open and water spills out of the rock so he can have his thirst quenched. Top bloke, right? Is it not admirable, not really respectful, not someone you'd pin your hopes of faith in? And then we read verse 20 of chapter 15, Samson led Israel for 20 years in the days of the Philistines. So he's then made a judge. We're not sure how or why, probably because everyone feared him and the Israelites went, he's on our team. So they made him judge, and he judged the Israelite army, and 20 years go by, just in a flash, in a verse, they're gone. He finds a prostitute and lays with her, and as they're sleeping together, he feels or senses that something skew is going on. And what was actually happening is the Philistines were laying a trap for him in the morning, the first light. So when he would leave the prostitute's house, he would be arrested and they would capture him. He got so mad at this that about midnight he jumped out of bed, he strolled through the city, he took the gates of the city and he ripped them off. Was that a temper tantrum? What was going on? He was not the most stable of characters, was our Samson. And then he meets Delilah. He falls head over heels in love with her, and we read the strangest kind of exchange of love that you've seen, where she tries to trick him and he tricks her and thwarts and escapes the trap that he knew was laid. And he does this 3-4 times, knowing that she's betraying him. And then the last time, he tells her the secret to his strength, and as a result, he is captured and tormented and has his eyes gouged out. Yeah, that's right. It's crazy, right? So his eyes gouged out. He's captured. He's arrested. He's imprisoned. They finally got him, the Philistines. So Samson didn't have any character. He wasn't wise. He was uncommitted in his marriage. He had rage issues. He wasn't a team player. He didn't care for his country, his nation, his fellow citizen, or the nation's reputation. He was a total maverick. He did whatever he wanted, whenever he wanted, and he was filled with revenge. So, here's a question I want you to kick around now. How do you reckon he ends up in Hebrews 11, Hall of Faith? His story concludes with these words. Have a read of it now in your groups. His motive wasn't even the glory of God. It wasn't even God's purposes or God's furtherance or God's kingdom or the people of Israel. It was revenge for them taking his eyes. And God responded. So ask yourselves this question. What do you think is the most important thing to God in Samson's story? Here's what we need to take away. Faith needs to be more about God than it is about us. In our thinking, it needs to be more about the action and the glory and the goodness of God than it does about us summoning up enough faith to feel adventurous. It's us giving in and saying, God, this is yours. When we see faith in another, we're not meant to be inspired and go wow about them. We're meant to be inspired and go wow about God, what God would do in the life of another. When we look at Samson's life, we should see the greatness of God, not the weakness of Samson. The greatness of God overcoming his enemies, the Philistines, for his people, the Israelites. But why is his story important at all? Look, why put it in there? Why bother? You see, because the New Testament writers saw the story of Jesus so clearly in the story of Samson. They knew when people returned to Samson's story, they would meet and encounter Jesus. They would see what Jesus did. You see, both Samson and Jesus, they were chosen from birth for an adventurous and glorious mission. They were both set apart by holiness for holiness. The middle 20 years of their lives was gone. No one knows what happened. They both took a Gentile bride. Samson in a Philistine woman, Jesus Christ in the church, you and I. They both destroyed an enemy. Samson as the lion approached him in the wilderness, and Jesus as he faced Satan in the wilderness. They both attended a wedding feast at their first public appearance. They both struck out against Israel's enemy, occupying the position of God's appointed deliverer. So Samson took on the Philistines, and Jesus took on the Pharisees and the Sadducees. They were both betrayed by the general public and left. And they were both betrayed deeply and ultimately by someone who they put a lot of trust in. And after their death, after the death that they endured, that was for the sake of others and the triumph of God. See, Samson's story culminates at the same point as Jesus' life does. A death welcomed for the sake of others. For Samson, his sacrifice was for Israel. For Jesus, his sacrifice was for all of humankind. It was for you and it was for me. Samson ended the reign of the Philistines, and Jesus ended the reign of sin and death. And in turn, he handed us eternal freedom. You see, when the writer of Hebrews put Samson's name down, it wasn't so people would emulate the faith of Samson. It was so they would be reminded and refreshed again of Jesus. So, how has Jesus shown up in your story? Throughout the Old Testament story, Jesus' presence can be discovered, and when we discover him, we are led to the cross. Just like throughout your story, others can find Jesus in you and be led to the cross, where they can discover the love of God. The cross is all we have, and the cross is all we need, and everything points to what Jesus did on it. So you may now want to pray in your house church groups that God might use your story to tell his story. Thanks, everyone.
Let's worship him together tonight. Peace like a river wash over me. Immerse me in water as deep as the sea. Hide me in love, your healing embrace. Peace like a river wash over me.
So worship your majesty, worship your holy name. Jesus, my everything, all that I am is yours. Drench the unseen. Pour out your presence, so pour out your praise. Come, Holy Spirit, Lord, have your way. So worship your holy name. Jesus, my everything. All that I am is yours. So worship your majesty. Worship your holy name. Jesus, my everything. All that I am is yours. Open the heavens, fling wide the gates, flood every heart with mercy. Pour out your presence, having our praise, as we cry, holy, holy. Open the heavens, fling wide the gates, flood every heart with mercy. Pour out your presence, inhabit our praise, as we cry, holy. Come on, sing, open the heavens. Open the heavens, fling wide the gates, flood every heart with mercy. Pour out your presence, inhabit our praise, as we cry, holy, holy. As we cry, holy, holy. Lord, send revival, Lord, send it now. Move your spirit, heaven break out. Come now in power, cover this land. Like you've done it before, would you do it again? Lord, send revival, Lord, send it now. Move your spirit, heaven break out. Come now in power, cover this land. Like you've done it before, would you do it again? Send revival, Lord. Lord, send revival, Lord, send it now. Move your spirit, heaven break out. Come now in power, cover this land. Come on, if we believe it, let's pray this out. Lord, send revival, Lord, send it now. Move your spirit, heaven break out. Come now in power, cover this land. Like you've done it before, would you do it again? Heaven break out. Lord, send it now. Move your spirit, heaven break out. Come now in power, cover this land. You've done it before, would you do it again? Oh,
Oh, what a Savior, isn't He wonderful? Sing hallelujah, Christ is risen.
let's adore him.
bow down before him, for he is Lord of all. Sing hallelujah, Christ is risen. Oh, what a Savior, isn't he wonderful? Sing hallelujah, Christ is risen. Bow down before him, for he is Lord of all. Sing hallelujah, Christ is risen. Oh, you are. And great is your faithfulness to me. And great is your faithfulness to me. From the rising sun to the setting same, I will praise your name. Great is your faithfulness to me. Great is your faithfulness to me. Sing of his faithfulness tonight. Great is your faithfulness to me. From the rising sun to